Let's take a look at some information and charts on ZRX or ZRX for Brave New Coin. So ZRX is a DEX aggregator, something that I've been historically bullish on for a while. The token is, I don't even know exactly. It has a governance component-ish. It has staking-ish. It's not something I'm generally super bullish on, even though I like ZRX as a project. ZRX has gone multi-chain, as every good aggregator should, in that it's now on Ethereum, BSC, Binance Smart Chain, and Polygon. Probably soon to be others eventually as well, as trading picks up on those other newer chains like Solana or wherever else that ZRX can get connected to. And if we look at the metrics for ZRX, sort of with the API and all the other connecting apps included over time since 2018, volume was basically zero for 2 years through ZRX, especially relative to centralized exchanges, relative to derivatives markets. And then in mid-2020 into present day, those volumes increased dramatically, now rivaling centralized exchanges to some degree or manner. So the use case was always there. It's just there wasn't a need necessarily within the DeFi ecosystem for an aggregator. And that looks to have changed definitely in recent times. One of the big reasons for the recent change is Matcha, their decentralized exchange. Again, multi-chain, you can type any token ticker you want, and it'll likely pop up here or get populated through one of these avenues. And for newer users especially, this UI is slick, it's simple, it's exactly what you want to see if you kind of don't know what you're doing, right? You can see what you're using as far as paying for stuff. So it's all straightforward, and it gives you warnings on slippage, tells you what's going on. It's a tremendous dApp for retail investing or people who don't want to get connected with centralized exchanges. So I'm bullish on Matcha and ZRX in that regard. Certainly here are the trading volumes over time for Matcha increasing substantially in May, and hopefully the party isn't completely over, and that wasn't the top of the top. Transactions increasing dramatically, users dramatically increasing. So all of this is even in the face of fees on Ethereum being extremely high to kind of do anything. One other thing that's important to mention is they do have limit orders here on Matcha, which not many DEXs offer. I believe 1inch does as well. But full centralized exchange functionality is eventually coming to these DEXs in some way, shape, or form. Now, I did mention staking, and these rewards will change over time, but essentially you can send your ZRX to any of these pools or connect to any of these pools, and you can earn a percentage of the fees generated in ETH. So sometimes these fees are going to be ultra low like they are now relative to where they were a week or two ago. No, that's part of the game, right? So it's, it's not AMM exactly, it's not staking exactly, but it gives you something to do with your ZRX, which was not previously available, right? You just basically had to buy it, hold it, participate in governance. For me, the average user, there isn't really much else to do with it. I can be bullish on the protocol, right? And look at DEXs and think DEXs are the next big thing for crypto, but ultimately for many of these governance tokens, unless there's a protocol level fee structure built in, it's hard to know what they're even worth. DEXs by volume, Uniswap, Sushi, here's ZRX at number 3, and all of the rest of the DEXs in here as well, DEX aggregators. Not sure why 1inch is off that list, but recently it looks like aggregator volume accounts for 22% of total volume, and we can look at DEXs across the board. Monthly volume, obviously just exploding. So if you weren't bullish on DEXs previously, I'm not talking about the tokens, I'm talking about the actual protocol level stuff. If you weren't bullish previously, it's hard to ignore 100 billion plus in volume in 1 month, and it's getting harder and harder to ignore 50 billion in volume since January. Right, now this will wax and wane with the market, sure, but this stuff probably isn't going anywhere anytime soon, especially considering it started at 0, right? Like, this was nothing a few years ago, even a few months ago. This volume was nothing. So DEX aggregators, certainly a bigger part of this conversation, especially when you consider multi-chain DEXs on top of just Ethereum as well. If we look at transaction counts for the token, again, it's a governance token-ish. I don't expect this transaction data to even tell me anything, but I like to look at it to see if there's any anomalies. Average transaction value is increasing along with price. That's something you typically see as well. So nothing super unusual here. If anything, you could probably correlate these spikes in transaction activity to highs or lows in price when you see a big spike like that. But to really use it in any other way, I don't think it really matters. active addresses, basically flat. This is kind of telling me all I need to know. There aren't many people using ZRX on a day-to-day basis, along with every other governance token that's attached to whatever DEX. NVT continues to fall to basically all-time lows, which in a vacuum should be incredibly bullish if this were some sort of medium of exchange, transfer of value, but the reality is it's probably neither of those things. So it's better to see this lower, but on the grand scheme of things, probably doesn't mean too much. So fundamentals for ZRX honestly couldn't be better. They're multi-chain, they're doing what they said they were going to do. They're trying to decentralize the governance in the ecosystem even further. If we flip to technicals, this is the 15 to 200 EMA, VPVR, volume, and RSI. And the first thing with RSI that I'm seeing on all these charts kind of since February, March is just RSI is just pointing down. And that's not generally something that's bullish, just a continued weakening of bullish momentum, strengthening of bearish momentum. 5200 will cross bearish most likely over the next few days, which is another nail in the coffin for any bull things in the interim. Price really has been bullish kind of since mid-2020, where some of these DeFi tokens quietly poked out of their multi-year ranges, retested that range, and then in January everything skyrocketed, obviously. But on the way down now, the support is back to that level. There really wasn't a lot of, or hasn't been historically a lot of activity between this level and 32 cents, right? There's some support at 50 cents, which is basically a 50% drawdown from here. But then after that, we're talking about 32 cents. There's a monthly pivot there as well. So this just needs some time, along with everything else, if it's going to be bullish again, because the technical trend here will flip bearish rather soon, as it will with all the DeFi stuff. It's already bearish on the cloud. It's below the cloud on the daily for the first time since breaking out. The only thing that may save these charts is this TKC clamp, where basically it's showing we are oversold. We sold off too quickly. You can see the averages here are super spread apart. Anytime you see that, it's typically the cloud telling you to take pause in additional sells here, shorts here. Very similar to this situation. Price went up and down very quickly and then went sideways, right? So we'll know, it's not, this isn't going to move without you. That's another thing people don't realize. These charts aren't going to just magically recover without you, right? Previously and usually this stuff takes 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months, right? But you'll know, there's plenty of signs here when it broke through the cloud that it was go time. It's not go time yet, very clearly on the cloud, which is one of the reasons why I love watching the cloud for signals, is for stuff exactly like this. It told you in January, this is it. This is what you've been waiting for since May, right? Since that breakout and breakdown, we're finally above the cloud again. So that was go time. Looking at ZRX-BTC on the 3-day, essentially has been unable to hold any sort of bullish momentum ever. And it's getting to the point where it probably will threaten lows at some point, because it's going to want to break this range. It tried to break up, got denied, tried to break down, got denied, right in the middle of this range again. So unless you're a range-bound trader or a range trader, you're probably not touching this until it's at lower lows or higher highs, because it's very likely that this just continues to do a bunch of nothing, you know, indefinitely until it makes a decision one way or the other. Tons of volume here as well. If it breaks up, I like 7K sats. If it breaks down, I mean, where does it go? Does it go to 700 or less? You know, like what's the downside here? 3,000 sats to 1,000 sats, you know, like there isn't much left on the downside after it breaks down from this range. If it does, kind of like the Doge mentality where it's at a low, maybe it's a buy, right? It was at 13 sats or 15 sats or 20 sats. Maybe that's a buy. And look where it went now. Not that I'm saying that ZRX has that possibility, but that's the kind of mentality people take when they're looking at charts like this and they start buying coins that don't necessarily perform super well against BTC or ETH, but they're just, you know, they're basically at zero relative to what they could be at. So there's just too much upside to not buy it at that point. Not that I'm saying we're there yet either, but, you know, looking at the ZRX ETH chart, this looks disgustingly bad. It established this multi-month range, broke down, tried to get back in the range, got denied. Now it's at all-time lows. It's got a bullish divergence here, but now it's got this volume resistance on the upside to deal with immediately before it can even return to the previous multi-month range. So it's just a hard ask to want to hold ZRX over ETH here. Even if you're getting ETH staking rewards, that'd be one thing to take this analysis to another step, would be to look at the liquidity mining or whatever the hell they call it, rewards. What do they call it? Liquidity rewards. Okay, so whatever they're calling it here, to see what it's been over time and if it's actually worth holding ZRX and collecting the fees in ETH. You know, that's honestly the best case scenario, because you don't want to collect a depreciating asset, especially when that asset is depreciating against Ethereum. You know, it's an ERC20. So I doubt it's worth to stake the ZRX based on this drawdown, but you know, that's something to calculate or to take into consideration as well. Lastly, I'll just mention the ETH-BTC fund and DeFi portfolio that I trade on Enzyme.finance, non-custodial portfolio management tool. You can see everything: AUM, allocation, performance, all the trades I make, which are done through DEXs, some of which are ZRX, most of which are Paraswap or a mixture of Paraswap and a bunch of other stuff. You know, when I hit the trade button here, I can it gives me this list of options. Typically, for most things, I'm better off trading through Paraswap or Uniswap. Occasionally, it's better to trade this through ZRX for this specific instance, depending on what I'm looking to do. But it's you know, it's included in what I'm actually doing with the DeFi portfolio, which is nice. It is also in the DeFi portfolio at a relatively small allocation, around 3.5%, mainly because it really isn't a productive asset, you know, relative to everything else that has some protocol revenue or exchange revenue. I can't stake it, I can't borrow it directly or lend it directly through Enzyme. So that would maybe be one thing that they could add, is to allow me to get connected to the ZRX liquidity stuff. The ETH-BTC fund has over 4.1 million in AUM now, and it's kind of, you know, all this stuff is highly volatile, especially the DeFi portfolio. So take that in mind if you do participate in any of this with ETH or USDC. It's gotten walloped along with everything else in DeFi since the 18th. And ideally, we don't retrace in a heavy way, and this DeFi fund can save itself, portfolio can save itself. But if not, you know, if we start breaking lows, I have to cut this stuff just like I would on the ZRX chart. So anyway, that's all for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe. If you have any questions about any of this, let me know, and happy trading.